Welcome to the Daily Word Verse by Verse. Grab your Bibles and follow along as we study the book of Romans. Keep in mind, I'm using the Holman Christian Standard Bible. So if you're using a different translation, the read is different, but the message is the same. Now, before we get into the study, please hit subscribe and like. And for your YouTube followers, hit the bell for notification of our studies that we're going to have coming up. All right. So we're in verse 26. Now, Paul is, in a sense, now revealing, the nature of man. When you carve away the exterior excuses, why a person doesn't believe, why a person lives the way they live, why they make some of the bad decisions they make, peel it all away. Remember, they're godless. Their nature is a sinful nature, and then they suppress the truth. Anytime you don't bow to the truth of God, the gospel, now again, not man's religion, and that includes Christian denominations, their method of salvation. There's a lot of that going on. But if we're not bowing to the true gospel, then that reveals that sin nature, that godless nature that causes us to submit. Now, suppress the truth. Now, the problem with that, when you suppress the truth, where do you go from there? So man will become worse and worse and worse and worse. So we'll first start off, remember that you had a person can even know God, and then he says, because over time, they rejected God. They didn't glorify Him as God. That's why in the period of time, pagan worship was the common practice. That people believed they had many gods. In fact, during the Roman times, the Christians were actually accused of atheism. Now, the reason why the Romans accused Christians of atheism because they only had one God that they worship, because the Romans would worship many gods. Now today there are some pagan religions today. India, even though India probably is now slowly moving as from paganism to industrial or technology is growing, but India has some 300 million gods that they worship. So there are a lot of pagan, when you get over into these nations, even Japan, as technological advanced as they are, they still have their pagan beliefs, their pagan religions, Now, so verse 24, the more you digress into the more you suppress the truth, then where do you go from there? Into further darkness. So now at this point, verse 24, he says, therefore God delivered them over to cravings of their heart, to sexual impurity, so that their bodies were degraded among themselves. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worship and served the creature. They worship and serve something created instead of the Creator, who is praised forever and ever. Now, so this is where we happen. You keep digressing into worse and worse and worse. And by the way, most pagan religions, especially in times past, has some type of sexual perversion in it. Now, in verse 26, it says, this is why God delivered them over to degrading passions. For even their females exchanged the natural sexual relations for unnatural ones. The males, in the same way, also left natural relations with females and were inflamed in their lust for one another. Males committed shameless acts with males and received in their own persons the appropriate penalty of their error. Now, this is one of the strongest statements, especially in the New Testament, of course, homosexuality and lesbianism. Now, the reason why that's important, we're not going to even dwell on that, but it's important to understand the Bible strongly condemns it. And it condemns it as an act of when you suppress the truth. You start off with that point. I also want to say that I think one of the biggest mistakes that Christians have made in America today is they have made this spiritual issue a political one. That's wrong. And we're not going to go down that road because they have so damaged the image of the gospel by doing that. Now again, you'll see what I mean as we move further. In other words, this is not the only sin that God deals with. But let's make no mistake that God does condemn it. Now what's interesting is that in America, as for example the gay and lesbian and all of the other letters move towards what they call equality, okay, so they want to be married, they want to be all that. That's not even what they really want, okay? And as I say, you have to kind of understand the political arena as to why we have to deal with the marriage issue and all the other kind of stuff. That their issues, the gay issues, right? Because they're combating the Christian political ideologies. Now remember, we're dealing with this, the sin nature of man. So even when you strip it all away, it's not going to be about them getting married or not getting married. They're really not going to care, okay? But the issue is going to be about is they're suppressing the truth. And notice he says right here that the sexual deviancy comes when you suppress the truth. So now what happens? You begin to have sexual desire. Now understand, these are the part of the sinful nature. And we all have sinful desires, okay? What Paul is doing here, again, remember this is a prelude to why do we need to be saved? Right here. Because we all suppress the truth. We all have inclinations towards things. So Paul is just only highlighting this particular one. He's going to move on. But he's saying, hey, here's an example of this. The homosexuality, the lesbian, and the unnatural feelings that one has, what we may call today same-sex attraction. Of course, then you go on to people who want to, men who want to be women, women who want to be men, the transgender and all of that world, okay? That all starts where? Forget the transition, but I mean the transgender issue or the gay issue, it comes for the godless issue, okay? Now verse 28 says, "And because they did not think it worthwhile to acknowledge God." This is the very first thing right here. Let me also say this right here. How would we deal with the gay and lesbian and transgender issue? Notice he says, "And because they did not think it worthwhile to acknowledge God." This is the issue right here. Preaching the gospel. Don't argue with their issue. Tell the truth. But notice he says, because they did not think it worthwhile to acknowledge God. They have a God problem, just like we all have a God problem. He said, because they did not think it worthwhile to acknowledge God, God delivered them over to a worthless mind to do what is morally wrong. In other words, God said, okay, you know what? When they persist in suppressing the truth and you will not bend, then God turns you over, just as he turned Cain over. Verse 29. They are filled with unrighteousness. And that's the key. Notice they're filled with unrighteousness. Now he's going to list the actions of the deeds. But the culprit, the main ingredient here is godlessness and unrighteousness. So notice what he says right here. They are filled with unrighteousness. And by the way, so remember, he just didn't pick on the homosexuals and the lesbian, but now he's going to pick on every sinful person. And that's where, again, the modern day Christians have messed up, because you singled out one sin, but you forget all of these other sins that I'm getting ready to list right here. So again, verse 29, they are filled with unrighteousness, all unrighteousness, evil, greed, right? Notice, this is what God also condemns. And wickedness, they are full of envy, murder, quarrels. Think about that, fightings, quarrels, deceits, malice. They are gossips, slanderers, God haters, arrogant. Look about that. Arrogant, proud, boastful. Look about that. Boastful, inventors of evil. People who think about just evil sin that they commit, that invent. Look at this one. Disobedient to parents, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful. Now, these are all qualities that God condemns, although they know full well God's just sentence, that those who practice such things deserve to die. They not only do them, but they applaud others who practice them. Now notice that. You sit around and in your rallies and you practice. I just took a shot. I took a little shot here. But you applaud evil. You applaud quarrels, boastful, pride, all that. Notice all of these qualities, all of these sinful acts, God condemns equally. He just didn't pick on the homosexuals. He just didn't pick on the gays. He just didn't pick on the lesbians. All of those. Okay? It's hypocritical to just to exclude this list. But notice he says, this is what man is. Man is sinful. Now we see this is what the wrath of God is revealed. This is why the gospel needs to be preached, because it saves us from these evil qualities. All right, we're in chapter 2 in the next video, so I'll see you then.